delay. You clicked live, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's going.
Okay. All right, Jamey, we got this thing started up. First off, I just want to say I'm grateful that you are giving us the opportunity to interview you and learn from you. I think it's an exciting thing to talk to leaders with backgrounds like your own. And I feel good saying that because we've got a similar background. But so
Exactly.
all that aside, yeah, I'm really excited. I'm grateful. But before we jump into it, I just want to tell everybody, just why we do what we're doing. And I, this idea of the corporate battlefield for me, came a dozen years ago. And what I've noticed in my life, and certainly as I've gotten older, it's become more clear to me that there is a battle between good and evil. And we can choose to ignore that battle, or we can choose to take our influence and our abilities and go be a part of the good fight against evil. And so my goal in doing this and just giving it away is that we help leaders be better leaders. We help wealth builders develop more wealth so that together we can take our influence and we can go help good. And so that's the whole idea of the corporate battlefield. And so, monthly, sometimes more often, we get leaders like yourself. We get some wealth builders on here, and we just kind of share some of the goods. So that's the table that I'm setting here. Today, we're focused on leadership, which I know you got a lot to talk about. But first, rather than me tell your background, I always like to ask the folks that join us to share their own background. So will you just tell folks who you are? Where you come from and kind of a little bit about what you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. Schuyler, thanks so much for having me on. This is incredible. Been excited about this and very, very glad to be here. So my name is Jamey Gadourey. I grew up outside Boston, and early on, kind of in my teen years, got an interest in going to West Point, ended up going there, commissioned into the infantry. Like many, got married right after graduation. My bride actually is from the great state of Arizona, so East Coast met West Coast ish, and that's where we live now, actually. So after about better part of 2 decades traipsing around the country, came back to Amy's roots, and just love being here in Arizona. That's a whole nother story in itself how that came about, but it's been great. And some of the journey, spent about 9 years in the Army, deployments to Afghanistan, Iraq, spent some time at the Ranger School as an instructor, as an air operations officer, coordinating fixed wing and helicopters, so parachuting and helicopter insertion training. And then when I got out, I linked up with a group of veterans who had a business operating out of Central Texas, and ended up moving there. They had several business units, still do to an extent. And I was part of the leader development, and that's where a couple things were going on. One, I was pretty broken when I got out, for multiple reasons. Some of that kind of dumb choices I'd made. Some of that just war is toxic, just by definition. And I landed in this amazing spot of folks who were focused on leader development. 98 grad Nate Self really took me under his wing, mentored me, a bunch of other guys that were just incredible people, incredible leaders. And it was a great spot to, I'll just say, like, kind of begin my healing, which I didn't even know I needed at the time. I look back now like, man, I was broken. And spent about 5.5 years with them, just learning so much about what I currently do. And meanwhile, my inner nerd and my inner should I be doing something else was active, and I was wanting to go back to school, use the GI Bill. And finally, Amy was like, "Dude, you keep talking about it. Why don't you just do it?"
Yeah.
So went back to school, went to seminary, got a master's in counseling, and during that time, realized, like, I love, like, what I do now. And really got a good idea of that. So I ended up starting my own business while I was in school, and then really took off with it when we moved out here in 2018 to Arizona. And so what it looks like now is I get to partner both one-on-one with leaders in coaching relationships, helping them get better, and then also working with leader teams to say, how do we function better as a team? And it's, as you would know, something new every day, and it's a lot of fun. And I grew through it too. As you know, one of the things we were looking at beforehand about like coaches and mentors, like I learned so much just from the people that I'm working with, because like, ooh, maybe I need to change something here. So that's
I think part of it. I mean, and you learned firsthand. Part of it's just being humble enough to know that it's a journey, right? If a leader comes to you and they don't have that characteristic, I mean, that's the first thing you got to fix.
Yes. Yep. For sure.
Well, let me ask you this, because I like to set the table so we can launch from there. What is your definition of leadership? Because I know everybody has a little bit of their own. We can kind of get on the same page a little bit, but what's yours? That way we know when you're speaking, that's the definition you're speaking from.
Yeah, I was thinking about your question. It took me back to two things. One is when I was getting ready to apply to West Point, got to do a tour, and one of the instructors there, he said, leadership is getting people from point A to point B. Pretty simple. Right. It was this like super simple definition. I always go back to that to an extent. And then
that's the task-oriented guy that we were talking about.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, super simple. And then about 10 years ago, I spent a lot of time with a colleague of mine who came out of the law enforcement world, a guy named Roy Bethke, a good friend of mine now. And we spent a lot of time kind of tweaking definition to get kind of, because you want it to be succinct. And so when I thought about like, how am I going to respond to that? I'm not going to be succinct, Schuyler. So I'm going to put a few things that's more like the third definition down in Webster's, of where it's just like super long and you end up not reading it, TLDR. Yeah. I would say for me, being a leader, and I divorce it from title, right? And more just, am I choosing to lead where I am? And I would say to me, it's in a sense, a mindset of first owning it. Right? Like there's something here that needs somebody to step into. Yeah. Whatever that is. Right. Yeah. So it's this ownership, and then it's moving towards then seeing where does this need to go. Sometimes that includes end state. Sometimes I'm not sure. I just know that I need to change what's happening right now. Yeah. And then it's involving the people around me to get there. And it's not just getting them from point A to point B, although obviously that's essential, but inviting them into getting to point A to point B in a way that they're doing it at least willingly and hopefully excited about it, and hopefully partners in it. So that's how I think about leadership today. And it's constantly changing and updating, hopefully.
Well, I like that. I like to think of it kind of in phases where and whether leaders understand this in the beginning or they grow into this, they all at some point understand, well, I've got to lead myself. Yeah. Then I can lead my team, and then I can lead my business. And you never stop leading yourself, but it is in that order, right? And so you mentioned in the beginning of your story there, your leadership consulting story, you had some brokenness to solve, which, the guys you were with, got you aware of that, so you could fix that. And then even in your definition you just shared, you talked about owning something. And so I, speak to that, just leading yourself. How do you lead yourself? Or even when you meet with your clients, how fast do you get to like, okay, well, is this guy or gal leading themselves appropriately so that they can actually go be a leader? What's that look like for you?
Yeah, I'll hit on two things. One of just like the being whole, and that's a topic that over the last few months I've been really meditating on, doing some presentations, working curriculum with a colleague of mine. And I'll say for a long time, even though I had some experience kind of in the mental health realm, on both ends of it, of sort of pulling that apart, and like leader development's over here and our like wholeness is over here. And my colleague, Alton McCollum, another West Pointer, he really pushed for our content of like, we got to talk about being whole souled, having whole souls, because you've got to lead out of wholeness. If you lead out of brokenness, bad effects will happen. Right. You may still on some metric be successful, but it's not good. It's not good for you. It's not good for the people. So I think that whole souled piece to me is gaining in sort of priority in how I think about leader development. Yeah. and in terms of kind of leading yourself, man, when I come in, one of the cool things in what I do is that I often get mirrors to myself.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's that invitation, like, all right, if I'm telling this person that they should be maybe thinking about this, it's like, well, Jamey probably should too. Right. And so I think that's a piece of where I get an invitation each day, I suppose, to practice humility in that sense. And then coming into it, I don't look at the way that I coach as something that's this sort of a cookie cutter that if you just do A, B, and C, you're good. Obviously, there's like core principles and habits and all that, but it's more like, where is this person at in their journey?
Yeah.
Where are they right now? How do I come along with them right now for where they're at and say, let me, as best I can, see the world through your eyeballs. Yeah. And then let's walk together. And in terms of their ownership, Schuyler, I think by the time I'm actually talking to somebody, most of the time they have a level of ownership. Otherwise they wouldn't be reaching out when it's one-on-one. Yeah. And the differentiator where I do see, I think what you're talking about is when it's a company has brought me in and maybe people are voluntold to the process. Yeah. And then it's a question of like, are they interested? Do they realize that they have something to maybe work on and move forward? And do they have an interest in putting in the time investment? Because maybe they're aware and they're just like, it's not on my priority list. Yeah. And so there's different ways that I see that. I do use assessments, which sometimes gives a window into that, like who tends to be more open. And then also, how do you dose it the right way? Because somebody that's like super self-reflective and maybe their own worst critic, it's like little droppers of feedback. But somebody that's like, I'm good, super steady, and it just brushes off. You might have to, jump on the desk a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, that's I love that, because I love the word steady. I actually, the value I think I bring to the world is in being steady. I think that's why my wife loves me. I think that's why my team loves me. Yeah. But it could be a bad thing too. Yeah. I mean, to some extent, like if you can't be shook up off of your high horse, you need that ability.
Pros and cons always.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when these teams are kind of sputtering, what do you see as like the top one or two things just kind of normally? Like you more times than not, when you're called in, you're like, it's going to be one of these areas. Do you have a sense of that?
I'm a big, and I know one of the things you mentioned we might talk about is models. I'm a big fan of Pat Lencioni and the team at the Table Group and their dysfunctions / functions of a team and behaviors of a team. And to me, like I have spent, and some of this is, just kind of how it's played out with the clients that I've had, but I spent a lot of time on that trust piece, right? Which is the foundation of their model. And that gets right into, of course, relationships, trust. They're not maybe precisely the same, but certainly they're building on each other. And to me, I always see opportunity to strengthen those bonds of trust. And I'm big on, like, trust can be a very kind of like in the old, like, I love Westerns, read Westerns. And like in the old days, they had like this nitroglycerin that they'd have to pack in sawdust. And like, if they were going to go, blow a mine shaft or something, they had to you're like, careful, you shake that too much and boom, the whole wagon's, going up. Trust is like that. Trust is like nitroglycerin, that if you use that word carelessly, I'll say, man, you can blow things up fast. And I'll say, I will raise my hand and say, I've done that. I have a vivid recollection of where I did that in a certain context. I walked in the room and I said, I think we have a trust issue. Well, you know what I did? I guaranteed that if we didn't have one before that meeting, we did after. Yeah. Right. When you say it that way, and what my mistake that I was making, I think many people make this, is we think of trust as binary. And right, it's either I trust you, I don't trust you, you trust me, I don't trust you. And it's not. It's really more different analogies you can use. You can say a spectrum. You can say it's like a bank account, kind of the love bank that many are familiar with. It's withdrawals and deposits. There's different metaphors, but to me, trust is always either building or maybe it's staying level, but then very, very brief moment, and then it's degrading. And so to me, it's always about how do we take wherever you are with trust right now, and wherever you are with the relationships of the team right now, and how do we build that up? And to me, teams always have a vast majority of the time, I hate saying always, vast majority of the time have room to grow in that trust and how they're operating together. I take that back into personality assessments, even knowing each other, because part of trust is knowing. You and I could work together for years and miss each other on what we think motivates the other person, on what we think intentions are, all of that. So I'm like digging into that. I see there's almost always room for growth in that. And that's key to me on leader teams.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point on the motivation piece. When your motivations are aligned, all you're really asking someone to do is to get what they want.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And when you're asking them that, and you're pushing them for that, and you care about that, one, it's stuff that's already on the inside of you. You're motivated to go get that, but you're speaking their language, and you're leading them, right? Yeah. You're like, all right, we're going to the same place. Let's just go together. And and a little bit of uncomfortableness is a good thing, but trust me, I'm on the path with you, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And then if you can do that in a steady way, then you're predictable, which I like to think that being predictable brings a lot of trust. Like when people know what they're going to get, that's when they really can trust you, because they feel safe.
Yeah.
Right. Safety is a big part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of assessments. I mean, is there kind of off the shelf stuff that you use, or is it all proprietary? I mean, what are some of those things that these guys can go out and research and maybe implement if they like it?
Yeah, there's so what I use with clients 95% of the time probably is a set of Hogan assessments. Mm-hmm. And they've got, a couple things I like about they've got a good body of research to kind of back up the validation and whatnot. And also the origins were focused on the workplace. A lot of assessments early on, at least, kind of came out of maybe a clinical setting, or they weren't normed right population. So that maybe the validity or the reliability of it wasn't perfect. So Hogan really focuses on that. It's also available in they're at like 50 something languages and counting that you can take it in, which is important because idioms are different language. So whatever my first language is, and that's what I should take it in. And then we can truly, and it's normed globally. So that's been great with it's a couple of international clients that I have. So I use the Hogans. It is a little pricey. It's like, for me to run it, just like my cost out is like $160. But then
per assessment, per
person. Yeah, exactly. So it's a little pricier. What I like on sort of the more accessible, if someone's just running something for their team, again, the Table Group in Lencioni, I love their team assessment. It runs $56.50 currently a person. Takes about 10 minutes, which is on the lower end of some assessments. And you get a great snapshot of what's going on with your team, with trust and healthy conflict, all that stuff. And then I'm getting more familiar with this one is their Working Genius, which runs $25 a head currently. And you get a quick snapshot of just that working style, like, energy, managing energy, like where I put my energy. What they try to identify is like what actually energizes you in a work cycle and what depletes you. And, I've, as you would imagine, I've taken, who knows, dozens probably of like assessments over the years, at least a couple dozen of just probing in. And I took this within the last couple of years, and I had like these light bulb moments, because, one of them is galvanizing, which is doing like the sales stuff and like, you should come to Outside, or you should talk to Jamey, all that. Man, like for years, that's been like my biggest thing. Like I hate marketing myself, like absolutely hate it. So I'm like looking at the results. I was like, that's why. Like it depletes my energy. Yeah. So those are.
No, that's good. That's good advice. So it's a combination of some behavioral assessments, some motivation assessments, and then to your point on the dysfunctions of the team, just if there is friction within the team, where and how is that manifesting? That's really what you're after.
Yeah, and what I like about the Table Group's team assessment is that it'll give you kind of that high level where you're at, and then it does a really good job of getting down to like, this is the specific behavior that everyone kind of agreed on was lacking.
Yeah.
And you can just like dive on. So it's both like this observational assessment, then it's also a bit of a prescription, or allows you to prescribe like, okay, how do we move forward? What do we need to work on?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you do these assessments, you got your information. I tend to think about it like our operations order from the military, right? You've got your situation,
Yep.
right, which tells you kind of the landscape of how we're operating. But then you move into the action piece of it.
Yep.
And so if I'm a leader, now I have this new information, right? Whether I knew it or I needed an assessment to know it. It's not a do it all in one day kind of thing, right? Like what's kind of the process of getting the team warmed up to what you're about to try to do, and then like as a leader, how do we step into that? That change, anyways.
Yeah. So for kind of the group setting, the team setting, really without fail, and whether they've already taken an assessment in the past or not, before we do something together, I'm always wanting to get sort of those one-on-ones with each person to get that group perspective on what's happening. So then you got sort of this multiple forms of research, if you will, right? You've got like the assessments and what that says. You've got the more anecdotal and qualitative from the interviews. And in an ideal world, they're working on some things themselves. They're taking some things out of those initial assessments for themselves, and then bringing that together at a team offsite is kind of the standard way. And I often say at the beginning, like, hey, if you guys all got together and played golf for a couple of days, like there would be value in that. 100%. We'll never argue with that. Just being together as a team, breaking bread together, doing an activity together. But in the portion that like I own, what we're going to try to do is accelerate that by getting to know each other better, by digging into some of these things that are maybe, what's going well, what's not, the friction points. And then out of that experience, it's kind of depends on the team and depends on what we've set up. Is this kind of a long-term growth? But really the ideal, and as a leader, if you're doing this for your team, is continuing steady drip. I think that steady drip, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly rhythms, but preferably all of them, continuing to circle back to some things. Just had this conversation with an executive this week of like, okay, how do we continue the gains from this? And he said, even just like 30 days from now, just shoot us a reminder of things we should be thinking about, because you get in it, right? You get in the fray, and the things that we're talking about right now, the time that your listeners are investing right now to think about these things. What often happens is we take it, we're jazzed about it, and we walk out, and then it just sits kind of on the shelf, because the battlefield, whether the battlefield you described earlier or just in general trying to make the business go, consumes our attention. And so to me, one of the best things that a leader can do is, and really, like I would say is probably universal, is clawback time for the stuff that really matters. And that's even, and I think of it, I call it staring out the window time, because that's like one of my versions. I have whiteboard time, we're staring out the window time, same thing, different modality or modem. And we don't do that enough as leaders. We just don't, universally, because it's so compelling to execute, because execution is what gets measured. Right. And to me, the best thing, and this is both easy, low-hanging fruit, and also extremely difficult as a leader, carve out time for yourself to just think about this stuff.
I'm on the verge of laughing, because we say this often around here. Leaders have to think. And if you can anticipate and not walk around this world reacting to things, it'll be a whole lot easier. And I don't think it. For a leader in thinking time, I think it has to be formal. I think you have to put boundaries. I think you have to have something to focus on, all the things, right? But when you're communicating with your team on those one-on-ones, like you were talking about, I tend to be a little less formal about it, but I am intentional. So in my one-on-ones, which we do weekly on my team, one-on-one, I'm not only affirming that person, holding them accountable, making sure priorities are clear, but the vision and what I'm thinking, I'm sharing that one-on-one, because if they can think that the way that I'm thinking, I know we can get on the same page. And so we do that one-on-one, then we do that in our team meeting, then we do that in our trainings. And then, by the end, they think that I'm just saying the same things over and over again, but that's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
Because if we can get aligned, then we're going to move, baby. We're going to be in control. Yeah.
And I might think, and maybe not, but I might think a little bit differently about it from what you described, to where, yes, I think there are important times that leaders need to think and very clear, like I'm dedicating time to think on this problem or to output something, whatever it is. I also think you need like true staring out the window time that you block off. And I think of like, a long run or some long endurance activity, a long hike or a shower, or, mindlessly doing some chore. Somebody I know, like he sorts his mail, right? And that's like, it's like unconstrained thinking time, right?
Yeah.
We need that too, because that's pushing all the way to the other end of like, to the creativity side of it, away from efficiency. We need some of that. That's where like those big ideas just sometimes pop.
Yeah.
Kind of in the middle-ish, I think what I think I heard you describe it, sort of like, hey, I need to think about this next venture that we're going to embark on, I have a deliverable, if you will, coming out of it, but I need the thinking time, and that's sort of in the middle. I think we also need some of that just unconstrained, not quite artist, like broke artist, maybe like level of, but pushing that way, right?
Yeah. No, I think I don't think I'm a super creative person, but I'm an idea machine. But I think it's because when I'm reading, when I'm just gathering experience from other people's lives, I am thinking, like, well, how does this apply to me? The whole time I'm reading. And that's, if I am a creative person, that's when it happens. And it's because I'm building off of someone else's experience or their words. Which is that's the flow state that I get in.
Yeah, I see that as creativity. I'm somewhat similar. I have a hard time generating an original idea, like a truly original idea. Like if you saw Russell Crowe and Beautiful Mind, like that was life's passion. I need an original idea. I can more take something and adapt it, which is creativity. And I'll say this, Schuyler, is that for me, it's like staring out the window or whatever, but there are so many variations for someone. I think what you just described, that's sometimes why I can't get through a book, because like I have ideas that get sparked, right? And then I'm like, I got to do something with this, and that is creative thinking time. It's just, where does the mind go as you consume the pages?
All right, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. You had mentioned models earlier. I love models. Again, if I'm going to be a creative person, it's because I'm just doing something on top of a model, right? But I didn't have to like create the model. Some of these leaders that are extremely effective, and there's EOS and some of this other stuff that's out there, right? But what are those like simple models that if you as a leader can adopt some version of it, or maybe it's just one model, that you like, that will make you up your game right away if you just implement it.
I do. I'll go back to Lencioni's model of the trust pyramid. I think that is a great one to get kind of a basic understanding of it and just keep like thinking about like, how does that operate at the team level? I think that's a terrific one, and easily searchable over the years. And maybe because like you, I have to build on something, but we've eventually established a model here at Outsider, which is, I kind of described it as, it's our version of the basics of leadership, and we call it the blocking and tackling of leadership. The idea being that if we were to think about what are the things that if we came back to over and over again throughout our journey as a leader, if we kept doing it just like blocking and tackling in football, get back to the basics, then we would be excelling. Like this is the substance that we should always return to. And so I've got a model that we use. The center of it is B. which you can take in so many directions of like, who am I as a person? What are my values? What are my motivators? Even I would say like being comfortable in your own skin is one of those, which is a big issue for many of us, of trying to perform to some external. And then that flows right into building relationships.
Yeah.
Ownership is one of it. Own it is a part of the model. See the bigger future picture. And many people, when they're defining leadership or what a leader does, they often focus in on sort of that vision, and that objective is a critical piece. And I think seeing that big picture, which is probably one of the things that uniquely a leader can do that everybody else on the team doesn't, because they're seeing the entire picture. And so if I'm working for you, you can come in and say, hey, Jamey, I see you struggle on this thing, man. And I know that it relates to this. Or what if I did this and put it in to help reduce that friction for you? Like, oh, I didn't even know that was an option, Schuyler. Right. Yeah. Like, and so there's so many things that come out of that, just that big picture, if you will, and then decide into decision making. And there's things missing on it that I would argue we can probably jam in somewhere. But to me, what's important, whether you take that model and build and edit it for yourself, is that every leader has something that they're working off of, some framework. This is where I like, yes, have a model, have something that's a little bit predictable, and don't worry about finding the perfect one. I think we spend a lot of time, I do at least sometimes, trying to find like the right answer. Grab something that appeals to you as a leader, implement it. If you want to change it a year from now, that's fine, but have a set period of time. You're like, hey, as a team, we're going to focus on this right here, and we're going to get really good at it. Yeah.
Yeah. I like it. All right. Characteristics. Let's say I'm the leader because I started the business, right? So hard to disrupt me, but as I'm going and I'm growing my team and I'm choosing other leaders, what are those couple of characteristics that when you see in somebody, it's kind of like I need to pay more attention to that person because they have the basics or the characteristics of a leader. What would you call those? Just two or three?
Yeah. And I'll name two that popped to mind as you were saying it. One is ownership, and does somebody own it?
Yeah.
And that you can dig into the research, whatever. Like, to me, if you see somebody that's taking ownership, leaning into, even when it's outside their domain, or their specified area of responsibility, to me, that's a distinguisher, and that's what you want. And if you're in a startup, that's almost like a prerequisite, right? Yeah. Like early days, at least, of a startup.
Yeah. You're frustrated if you don't do that.
Yeah. You got it. Like, it has to be leaders who have that deep sense of ownership. The other, to me, and I might not, this is one I might not have answered the same way, a couple or several decades ago, but it really is about their ability to build relationships, right? And their ability to be relational, to be empathetic, to embedded in it, I'd say too, is this curiosity about other human beings.
Yeah.
Because I know what I know, and I tend to think that the way I think is how you think.
Yeah.
And it's just not reality, right? We are created with such complexity and such like this, like whatever you want to call it, a kaleidoscope, or just like, it's amazing all the ways that we shine in different ways, and how we're built and what our capacities are. And so I think someone who's either able to see that or is curious about that in other people. Yeah. And I think those are two critical things, that ownership and that sense of relationships.
But even if you just make it a task, like we were talking about earlier, if you just said, hey, look, go run these assessments, and then you'll have information. You don't have to be curious about it. Like,
right.
You will have the information, so you will know.
Yes.
And then you can use your intelligence again after that to stay in line.
Yeah.
With each person individually.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
No, I like that. All right. I want to get better as a leader.
Yeah.
What does that daily work look like? What resources can I go to, or how are you sharpening the knife every day to make sure that you're becoming a better leader, consistent?
Yeah. No, that's good. And I'll say what I've observed, that we have, personality can play a lot into this, right? And some people are just like, man, give me the system, right? Give me the system. Let me overlay it. I'm going to commit to it. I'm going to do it. And it's predictable. And if that's your personality, do that. Right. And there's plenty of them out there of like, hey, ways to order your morning or your day or like, and if that's you, boom, do it.
Yeah.
Others are more like, hey, I'm a little more shoot from the hip. I'm more flexible. And like the rigidity actually might make me do it less.
Yeah.
In which case it's like, find ways to set reminders for yourself of what it is you're aiming towards.
Yeah.
And look for those big aha moments. Like for me, I'm more, if you give me if you challenge me on something and I end up having an insight from that, I'm just going to keep thinking about it. And I'm going to start seeing ways that it applies. And then in a moment, like, oh, that's what Schuyler was talking about. Oh, cool. All right. I need to change this. Right. And it's on this like low simmer, right. On the back of the stove, maybe, or like a crock pot. It just keeps going. And I think that's like a great way too. So to me, it's like understanding that about yourself as a leader, like what is most effective? Do you need some predictability, rigidity? Sometimes maybe take a course, right. Or adopt a framework, commit to it, implement it for 3 months, whatever, or find ways to get yourself inputs and then put reminders up. Some people do well with putting something on a whiteboard. I'm a big, like, I put stuff on my whiteboard, getting better, like clearing it, like whatever it is that works for you. I would say the idea is keep it front of mind.
Keep it front of mind. Yeah. Yeah. I know for myself, that peak kind of energy, that peak performance status, that like Tony Robbins talks about. I kind of have to be that guy. So I have to have a routine in the morning that gets me in the right mindset. Because otherwise, I'm just going to go walk the earth as a very decisive and task-oriented person. So, every morning I do remind myself that I am going to be loving. That I am patient. I choose all these things, but it is a morning routine that gets me there.
Yes,
because otherwise I'm going to wake up like the infantryman I was, and my warrior days are behind me. So, well, that's great. All right, what have we not covered that you think I should have asked you and you should have talked about here for these young leaders, or maybe even established leaders?
Yeah, the one of the things, you'd sent me some kind of questions to think on, and one of them was about just like either where leaders are failing, and I've sort of like reframed it as where they're constantly challenged. And I'll say one thing that's really front of mind for me right now, besides the clawing back time, and I can talk more about that in a second, but like I think almost always underestimate our influence. We just do. And I know like this forum that you have is about like influence and resources and all that. And I'll tell you, I see it consistently. Leaders underestimate their influence. And I'll share that this is an extreme example, but I think it makes the point. During COVID, I had a client, they were doing a lot of virtual meetings, and she was at a senior leadership role where she was. And she said, you know what, over time, I realized that if I showed up on camera and one hair on my head was out of place, I would get messages immediately after asking if everything was okay and if the company was going to be fine.
Yeah. Wow.
Like, that's bizarre. But like, that's the level at which we don't realize that people are looking to us all the time as leaders.
Yeah.
Are you agitated? Are you hyper-focused? Are you like all of the above? And to me, that's opportunity, right? And it doesn't, sometimes I think we burden ourselves with like the weight of like having to do something helpful to our people. How do I develop my leaders? That's a big problem. It is a big challenge. It's complex. And your influence is so great that even a little tiny conversation in passing can make a difference, not just in somebody's day, in their week, their month, their year. Like our influence is incredible. We underestimate this all the time.
Yeah. I think that's so true. And quick story on that. I had a general actually that was a mentor of mine, and he sat me down and he goes, "Let me tell you how safe you have to be when you're a leader. When I sit down at a table and I tell people I have an idea, what do they take it as?
Yeah.
They take it as a command, right?
Yeah.
Like if the general had an idea, that was a command to go do something.
Yep.
So he says, that's why I don't talk a lot.
Yeah.
Because when I open my mouth, it matters. Like everybody writes it down.
Yep.
So the higher you, to your point, the higher you go up in your organization, maybe the less you speak, because you should do more listening. And when you do speak, it has to be so accurate and intentional.
Yeah.
Because everybody's running with that guidance.
Yes. Yes.
Or to your point, they're worrying, or they're excited, or you name the emotion there. But I think if a guy's a general, he knows a bit about leadership, and it was one of the few lessons that he burned into my mind because it's that important. Yeah,
it's a bit of a tangent from that, but I think very parallel. I'm slowly reading through this book called Our Souls at Work. It's an older book. It's a compilation of essays by believers, and one of the guys makes the point, and he was multinational business. He's the CEO of it, and he goes strong and hard on the fact that as human beings, making decisions is like part of our humanity. Like it's like when we're able to have decision-making power, that's like we're alive. And so part of what they just instill culturally is they push decisions down. And this is the part that really wrinkled my brain. He said, as CEO, I try to make one decision a year.
Man.
Everything else pushed down. He says, now look, it's not haphazard. Everyone's required to come get input.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the decision is theirs.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
but how many questions do you think he's asking every year?
Exactly. Right. You're asking, and to me, that's the easy, again, low hanging fruit. Ask amazing questions.
Yeah.
And then listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. All right. Well, I mean, we could talk the rest of the afternoon.
Great. I'm enjoying it.
But I've enjoyed it. What are you working on today, and how can guys follow you,
Sure.
keep up with you, or even reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. That's the easy way to reach out. Our company, Outsider Consulting, is on there. Feel free to follow. And then I'm actually hosting a podcast currently for another company that's in the leader development space, but they're on the technology side. They've got a leader development app. It's a startup. I'm having a blast. I get to do this kind of thing, which is great. So that's called the Live Leaderly podcast. It's on Spotify and Apple. And we've got a website, outsiderconsulting.com. But really, quickest thing for everybody on the call, just hit me up on LinkedIn. That's easy.
Yeah. Yeah. Super easy. All right. In Arizona. All right, my friend. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate your service to this country, and really the service you're providing for the world now, and the fact that you're doing it from a whole soul standpoint. I think that's a beautiful way to put it, and I'm just grateful. All right, this is how all these end. I didn't charge you to watch this, but you all know that we're trying to do good in the world. So if you did like this content, go to our webpage and donate. $5, $10, it doesn't matter. We give 100% of the money to teachers in financial need. I've got kids. These teachers are the ultimate partner in raising those kids for me. They spend more time with them than I do. And they don't make a lot of money, and they are the true future of our world. It's in their hands. So, if we can do anything to help these folks out, I think it'd be a beautiful thing. So, stay in touch with us, Jamey. Hopefully we can have you live here in Austin soon, and hopefully I can provide value to your life here soon. But I thank you a lot.
Thanks so much, Schuyler. This has been awesome.
Awesome. Take care.